mains and Yasuo mains alike. I am the Nightwing, Way of Life Esports, coming at you guys with another League of Legends video. Now, before I talk about CLG, I just kind of want to say a few things before. The podcast is pretty much going to be solidified 7:30 Pacific Central Time for anybody that is in the podcast group. Now, if you are in the main cast for my podcast, remember, I need you to watch LEC, LPL, and LCK because I want to have the podcast diverse between the 4 regions. Now, if you don't want to do all 4, that's perfectly fine. We can just keep it to LEC and LCK and maybe save LPL when they get to the playoffs, but I would humbly prefer if we talked about more regions than just NA. That has always been a rule of mine. I don't want to be stagnant into one category. Now, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to talk about LEC, LPL, and LCK because of their time zones and all of our different time zones. But more or less so, what I was thinking about was that we just talk about what happened during the week after the games are over, because obviously we'll have a chance to talk about NA first because, you know, NA takes place between Saturday and Sunday, while Korea is literally like Monday, Tuesday. LPL is also Monday, Tuesday. EU's on Thursday, Friday. It's crazy. So we'll figure everything out, but I really want to say thank you all to who has joined the podcast, part-time and full-time, and I can't wait to make sure we get our League of Legends hot takes out. Obviously, I'm going to work on getting Discord ready for you guys. I know a lot of you have talked about Discord. My Discord is just not working at the moment. I'm going to obviously get it working, but I do like Google Hangouts a little bit more personally. But hey, that's just my own personal opinion. But without further ado, let's start talking about CLG. So we've talked about pretty much every single roster except for FlyQuest, Immortals, and that's pretty much it. I've talked about all the teams, you know? Here's CLG, a team that people have a lot of high expectations for. When I was actually doing the podcast with the guys on last Thursday, they were very adamant on CLG. Some of them had CLG at 3rd over Cloud9. Some of them had them at top 5. Some of them had CLG at 4th. I think that this roster can actually be the 4th place team. I think that it's a tie between them and Cloud9. There's a lot of similarities here between the two rosters. I think that CLG is going in with veterans and a lot of more they're going to be considered upgrades for them. Now, CLG hasn't really been the top team in North America since they won in spring 2016 when they went to MSI. They got 2nd place. They pretty much were the very first team to overall solidify themselves and North America at international events along with the Cloud9. But remember, they've only ever been to one MSI, and they had a really good roster at that point. They all played at their incredible high highs, and Stixxay is still here after all these years, and it's still something that CLG is always a big, older, constant mainstay in the LCS, and there was a point in time where, you know, they obviously weren't that good, and they could barely make playoffs, and they missed playoffs like 3 splits in a row. It all started when they switched the roster around. They even got Darshan out of the way this past year, and we saw how Ruin was able to effectively get them to a newer, higher point than they had not hit in so long. Darshan had been called a weak point. Finally, they got rid of him for Ruin, and we saw the effect of that. And this is the same effect that Cloud9, I think, will have to go through this year. Is there's going to be some tough troubles for Cloud9, because obviously changing up the roster always breeds in some type of issue. It doesn't have to be anything bad. It's just that it just always happens with any new team build. There's going to be a point where there's going to be a lot of growing pains, and that's just going to happen. And that's going to also happen with CLG. Now, remember, for all the Cloud9 fans out there that say that, oh, C9 kicked Sneaky, oh, we're done for. I mean, Darshan was kicked off CLG. They brought in Ruin, a change, and now they were able to compete at the top of the LCS again. So just a little bit of change is all you really need. That's just my own personal opinion. Now, the TSM CLG rivalry, let's be honest, gosh, I almost said the wrong word, XD. Let's be honest here, guys. The TSM CLG rivalry is pathetic. It's only really ever between Hotshot GG and Reginald. TSM has clapped CLG pretty much most of the time they were rivals. I consider TSM versus Cloud9 a real rivalry, not CLG versus TSM, which is what I feel like is a Riot forced rivalry, because let's just take a recent example. Before CLG beat TSM in that one random best of one, before that, 3 years straight since 2016, all the way up until that one best of one that happened during summer, TSM had clapped CLG for 1,000 days. They had not won a single match against them. So I don't even care about what was past, but let's just talk about recency. If you've been losing to a team for more than 1,000 days, it was the longest losing streak that one team could have against another team in their own region. Get that through your heads. It was a it was the longest losing streak a team had ever actually had to another team, ever. And only so fitting it would come from the LCS, right? But can this CLG roster really hit new highs? It's really hard to say, because they're keeping Weldon, which I think is good. They have Coach Song, which is a good part for that, because you're going to need Coach Song to translate for Crown and Ruin, which is totally fine. Ruin's getting better at his English, so maybe not more or less so for him. But we saw that Meteos and Crown had pretty decent synergy, but the communication is what really made it hard for them to actually execute game plans properly. I do believe that Crown was the third best mid laner, tied with Froggen at the end of the split. I really don't believe Niski was the second best. I actually thought that Crown was significantly a lot better than him. It's not really even just in terms of stats. He just played better. Like, his laning was better. His overall team fighting was better. I know in certain games it didn't really look like that, but, I mean, he had a bad team, and I think that it's really showing of a player and really admirable of a player if they can carry bad players. Because you factor in, you're in the LCS, it's you versus, 5 other players. If you have 3/5 of your roster, which is super heavy, like it was when he was on Optic with Meteos, then you have to factor in he has to be better than 5 other players to really actually get them to where they need to be. And remember, they switched out Power of Evil for Crown, and then Crown was able to get them to playoffs. Only time ever Optic actually made it, because they later on got bought out by Immortals. But you can see the effect he actually had on the team. And I think that with better pieces around him this year, he's actually going to perform even better than he did last year. I thought that he was incredible. I think he was at least the first or second best mid laner, and I think just because he didn't make it as far as Niski did doesn't mean he wasn't better. And people always say I'm biased, and it's just not true. But I mean, hey, I think Crown was the second best mid laner, or first best if you really want to put it there. Jensen, I don't think performed that much better than him. I think that Froggen performed better as well, but I'll save that for the Dignitas video, because I have Dignitas, Immortals, and FlyQuest to do before I start really going to EU and stuff like that. So yeah, I think Crown with better pieces this year will actually have a lot more success and could possibly get CLG to being top 3. To be fair, they were top 3 last split, so having upgrades could essentially mean that they get an even higher ranking. Some people actually have them as the second best team in the LCS. Now, I think that's a little bit too crazy, because you have to factor in their other roster. So let's see what the other pieces of the roster actually include. So I do think Crown is a really good mid laner. I don't really understand why people don't think that. I mean, people like to use the stats argument. The stats argument is really bad in League, because stats aren't gameplay, and it's not really showing what is the most effective way the stats could really be fulfilled. I've explained that in a lot of other videos. I'll explain that more in like a future dedicated video to itself. But in layman's terms, stats aren't showing me gameplay. Like, Gimgoon had the worst stats for pretty much any top laner at Worlds. Was he the worst top laner there? No, because clearly that was some wildcard top laner who was the worst top laner, but you know, stats show Gimgoon was the worst, so was he the worst? You know what I mean? Like, no, it's just like, people need to understand the stats argument is pretty pathetic when you actually think about it in the grand scheme of things. But let's look at the rest of the roster. So I'm gonna be a little bit spicy with this one. I'll look at the top side of the roster first before I look at the bot side, because most people actually think the bot side will be pretty good. I think that people need to really actually tone back their overhypedness on a lot of these bot lanes. I think that a lot of these bot lanes are getting severely overrated because people just want to have someone over Double Lift and Core JJ. If you think Stixxay and Biofrost are gonna be that, I mean, people are delusional, and sometimes delusionalness is a sickness, and sometimes people just need to take pills to cure the delusionalness, but it's okay. Let's start with Ruin. So Ruin came into the LCS from 1907 Fenerbahce. He was a clear-cut upgrade over Darshan. I mean, no one's going to argue that, right? Later on into the split, it was very visibly shown you could exploit him. I had already previously seen Ruin play on Giants when Giants were in the EU LCS back in 2018. This is when Giants went through the promotional tournament after being relegated, and I saw him on Giants with Betsy, Joko, I think it was Sir Nukes a lot, and their AD carry was Steelback. I just think that he wasn't really that. He was the same player. He wasn't bad, but he was the exact same player he was in the LCS. Did he get better? I mean, better is a subjective term, so he got better in terms of laning, because I think that being in EU and the Turkish scene actually improved his laning, because he showed that improved laning at the previous MSI, the one he went to, with 1907 Fenerbahce, and I thought that was pretty good. I think he's a serviceable, decent top laner. Was he all-pro top 3? You're out of your mind. But he's a decent top laner, and I think he's a massive upgrade over Darshan, and it still showed that, because once they swapped out Darshan, they did better. And I know people don't like me saying this, but you gotta change up your roster sometimes. If it's not working out or not the results you want, switch it up. You're never gonna know what you can achieve unless you change it. And if you just constantly do the exact same thing, hoping for the same result, you're not gonna get it. And let's go to Wiggly. So Wiggly had I've seen this guy since Cloud9 Academy. So basically, he got kicked off Cloud9 Academy for being toxic. And you can kind of tell he was from his kind of facial expressions that he does. He was kind of the player that didn't really take losing very lightly. But that's just how I read people. I can kind of tell who's going to have good synergy versus who's not going to have good synergy personally. But that's just, my own personal take on it. So he later on goes to CLG Academy. He's a backup to Reignover. After that, he played this split fully, 2 splits, because Reignover later on retired essentially and became a coach. He had a pretty bad spring split, got better in the summer. He had some MVP nods. I thought he played pretty well. Thought he massively improved from his spring split. I think that he's a serviceable, stable jungler. I think that carrying the game isn't really what he is supposed to do. But I think that if you need a low econ, serviceable carry jungler, I think he could be there for you. And now he has a Korean top and a Korean mid he cannot speak to. Wow. Looking at how that's always really panned out for people, it really doesn't pan out that well. But what I'll say, because he never really ganked for Ruin. You know what I mean? Like, he had, I think, some of the lowest top to jungle proximity in the league, because it's just, how do you expect him to really effectively help Crown or Ruin if he can't talk to them? Like, Meteos and a lot of other people who have had Korean imports say the exact same thing. How can you effectively play the game if you cannot talk to your teammate? I don't care if you're shot calling your ass off, you know what I mean, like 24/7 during a game. It means nothing if you can't effectively communicate with somebody. Your shot calling all goes to shit. I think is a pretty good developing North American top jungler, but I think he will have some struggles with playing with a Korean top and a Korean mid. That's what I think. And just now, onto the bot lane. Stixxay and Smoothie. Overall, Stixxay was a pretty good ADC. I think he massively improved from his spring split, which was really bad. I think he's been fairly underrated slash rated. I think that he's decently serviceable, can carry the game if need be, but can't play that scaling low econ ADC style that we've all seen. He is a good ADC for LCS standards. Will he be at the top upper echelon with Smoothie? Smoothie had a really tough time on TSM. I mean, I like the guy. I've always liked him. I thought that he was a great... I still think he's a great support player. I think that TSM ruined him. I mean, because TSM just ruins all their players. This is a known fact at this point. TSM turned the junglers into wards and then ruin every shot caller support. Yellow Star, Mithy, now Smoothie. I even said at the beginning of the year, why the hell do you bring over shot calling supports and then don't listen to them? You know, I don't know. It's like a fat person, you know, calling somebody else fat and they're fatter than you. Like, really, you'll never actually really know personally. But will he function better on CLG? Because TSM thought that thought that swapping out Biofrost for Smoothie, a straight up trade, was a better situation for them. TSM thought that they got an upgrade in what they needed, and CLG thought they got what they needed in an upgrade. Biofrost had a decently better split than Smoothie. I know he got MVP nods. Last split was anybody could be MVP, man. But Biofrost, I mean, people were honestly kind of reaching there. How their bot lane could work, I think that Smoothie can bring a lot of effective things, and he's played with Koreans before on his roster, so there's better points that he can work with. I think he needs to develop good synergy with Wiggly in order for it to really work. I think that their bot lane could be a very good North American bot lane from how I've seen Smoothie play versus how I've seen Stixxay play. I think that Sven and Smoothie were just not a good pair. Like, on paper, it sounded like a really good bot lane, but more or less so after that, we saw how that just completely fumbled and failed, and we literally realized that that was just an atrocious bot lane for Sven and Smoothie. But I think that this bot lane is a breath of fresh air for him, and I think that playing with a North American ADC, which we've seen him obviously play to a higher degree since when he was playing with Sneaky, is that a North American ADC always functions with him better. Yes, I know I'm only using the one example, but hey, it's the one that works out the most for me. So yeah, that's my, talk about CLG. I have, Dignitas, Immortals, and FlyQuest to do. So we pretty much ran down most of the teams. I think this roster is not bad. A little overrated. I think people are really starting to put a lot of stock into players that pretty much, I'm not going to say where they were lucky, but, they were good, but not to the, see, there's what I like to say is there's good players, and then there's your Bjergsen, Jensen level players, right? Well, Ruin was nowhere near a Jensen level player, and neither was Wiggly. They were what you would call, where would I place them at? I don't know. Just good players. Like, you don't have to be decent or average. You can just be a good player. I thought they were good players. Like, CLG always fields just good players. Nothing super special, nothing super extravagant, but getting Crown and Power of Evil in these past 2 years shows that they are willing to spend for the good mid laner. I mean, Crown is a good mid laner. I don't know where people really think, how do you get to playoffs not be, it's just, he's not bad. Like, we literally saw him get counterpicked and then take the pick that is supposed to get counterpicked and then they destroy his lane opposition. Remember, there was one game, somebody chose to pick a counterpick into him and they got utterly destroyed. Like, he's absolutely incredible. I don't know where people think that he's bad. It's just brain capacity and people is just so low nowadays that just saying blasphemous shit is just a thing, But yeah, that's my opinions on this roster. Good team, could make top, a playoff contending team. I don't think this team should be bottom of the pack, just like they were a couple years last year, or in the middle of string when they did make playoffs. This roster, I think, is going to be at least top 6. Where am I going to place them? I don't really personally know yet. I'm still doing my power rankings. I said that to my podcast team. I need you guys to have your power rankings, not this next episode, but the following one we will be doing power rankings because we need to kind of discuss where's everybody's power rankings and then maybe kind of make a sweet bet. You know, the loser has to buy the winner art, like what's the thing that riot points, like RP? Yeah, RP or yeah, RP. Maybe the loser buys the winner like $5 in RP. You know, it's just some, you know, some silly. But yeah, see you guys later. Like, comment, subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I'm the Nightwing, and Way of Life Esports is signing out. See you guys later. Goodbye.
Hi there, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more stuff.
Yeah, thank you.